So Alyssa,
Hey, Deanna.
why did we choose the Midsteeple for our inquiry project?
Well, we chose it because it's at the top of a hill in town center, and I believe that everyone here has walked by it at least a couple times in Dumfries, but maybe you've never stopped to look. While we will be looking at math, literacy, science, and art, we're specifically looking at social studies as the big picture. We are looking at Scotland curriculum just because it focuses a lot on the history of Scotland, but we believe that if you found a place in Nova Scotia, it would tie in really well as well. We're looking at the first level of achievement, which is P2 to P4, which in Nova Scotia terms is grade 1 to grade 3. So specifically for social studies, students should be able to, by exploring places, investigating artifacts, and locating them in time, I have developed an awareness of the ways we remember and preserve Scotland's history, as well as I can use evidence to recreate the story of a place or individual of local historical interest.
Another truck going by. Another thing we should be aware about is the noise. So it'd probably be hard to get all kinds of students here and listen very carefully. So it's one issue that we maybe come across.
We don't want to just bring a bunch of P2s to P4s to a mid-steeple and not have them prep anything. So there's a bunch of things that we could do beforehand, but the biggest one is kind of to start looking at Scotland's history. For the younger kids, that might be a little bit more explicit, but for the P4s, they could start researching it on their own. So that's going to involve us teaching the kids how to research, what essential questions to ask, and really how to decipher what is good research versus bad research. So in science, we're going to want to look at how buildings are constructed and the different types of materials that are used. That way when they come to the mid-steeple, they can really explore that in more greater detail. In math, we're going to want to look at measurement, and we can combine that with social studies to look at maps. When they get to the mid-steeple, they're going to see the different distances from different towns in Scotland. So afterwards, we could do a map activity with that, but they're going to need that prior knowledge before we get there. I was thinking maybe after our initial visit, we could bring somebody in from, say, the box office to come into the classroom and kind of give us a brief overview of what it's used for today, what they do in the box office, and maybe some history as well. That way when the students, especially the younger students like our P2s, come back, they kind of have an idea and some prior knowledge of what to expect.
As you can see here, this is our first field trip, and Pete the Panda has a great example of what the kids would be doing, and that is that they would be drawing the mid-steeple. So they'd be looking at the wall, and they'd be looking at what they could find, and they'd be drawing it. Obviously, the mid-steeple is huge, so they could draw like the outside, or they can even pick one of the little pictures, like the picture of St. Michael, or even the coat of arms up there. Ooh, Pete, what do you see there? You looking at all the cool things in the window? This is going to be our second field trip. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the kids to come and take a look at what the mid-steeple is like now and all the different shops that they have. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so we would just let students kind of explore the shops that are here now and let them get a taste of what the mid-steeple is used for. We'd also contact the shop owners ahead of time just so that they know we were coming, and hopefully they'd be willing to answer the questions that the students probably will have.
Okay, we've already had a brief talking in our classroom about the history of the mid-steeple and what it was like in the past, because the mid-steeple was actually built in 1707. So we take the kids back to the mid-steeple so that they could envision what it was like almost 300 years ago. Okay, if you look closely, you can see Pete the Panda, one of our students, taking a look at these beautiful plaques on the mid-steeple. Now this plaque right here shows all the different distances to some of the towns and the cities across the island. Now, cool fact, at Huntington, that's where they used to do their cattle herding. So they used to go, they used to trade their cattle. Well, now that we have all the information about the mid-steeple, we'll talk about a movement that happened in the 1970s. So, in the 1970s, the mid-steeple was actually leaning, and so they were going to demolish it. But there's a campaign set out to save the steeple. And so what we would do is we could ask the kids to actually create their own campaign depending on what they like. So it could be about the steeple, or it could be about something like their own playground, depending on their ages. earlier in our video, you saw that there was a little map with all the distances to the different towns and cities across the island. So what we could do is we could actually ask the students, how do you think we could actually get there and how long it would actually take? And then we could look at from our own school and see how close or how far things were from our own school and then calculate the distances there. Also, the map is in miles, and so we could calculate how far it would be in kilometers. Thanks for watching!
We hope you come visit the Midsteeple soon.
Love you, bye.